differentiate the differences between a standards review and a road safety audit. They're two different aspects of the design process. It's important that we understand that they have their own functions, and yes, we just need to associate what that differentiation is. We'll understand the difference between design vehicles as well as checking vehicles. Identify common issues that regularly occur in swept path diagrams, and differentiate between different site distances and how those are calculated. Identify common road safety audit issues for detailed design stages of road safety audits. Differentiate between an RSA and a compliance audit of a traffic management plan and a guidance scheme. And identify common road safety audits issues for construction stage road safety audits. So there's lots and lots to get through today. And yes, I was just wondering, sorry, Catherine, would you mind making me a host, because I can't share my video as well? So.
Yep, sure.
Hopefully that's an easy fix.
Does that work for you, Max?
No, I still cannot start my video because the host has stopped it. This is what happens when Ken's not attending the webinars. We all tried our best. That's all right, we'll get through there.
I think that should work for you, Max.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. Just so you can see my face as I'm chatting, but I'll just keep going through until Reese does join again. That's our other specialist presenter, but he's not in it today. All right, so the difference between a standards review or a design review versus a road safety audit. We'll just get sucked straight into it. There is an overlap between these two different design phases. However, a standards review may pick up on things that don't necessarily impact upon road safety, and vice versa. A road safety audit could pick up things that may not necessarily be, a departure from a standard or a guidelines, but it could still be a safety concern. So they both have their own merits and they both have their own uses. G'day, Reese, you're back on board.
Back. Apologies for that. I'm having some technical issues.
That's okay. Do you want to, we'll share your screen again and let you get started. So I just got up to, you can see this slide here.
Yeah, if you could just allow me access to the camera, that'd be great, Max.
Not a problem. That should be available now.
Yeah, great. All right. Screen. How are we going? Got that there?
Wonderful. So we covered off on that slide. We'll just get you to get stuck into the differences there, mate.
Fantastic. All right, so let me go through.
And if possible, chuck your camera on as well.
Yeah. Am I going to allow me to go on? How's that? There we go. We're all good there.
Yep, your video's up, so just need to go to full screen of the presentation.
No worries, mate. Just for that. So a little about me. Yeah, Max has already done an intro about me. So,
and then, so I just got to flip the display settings. There we are. Okay, good to go, Reese.
All right. So a little about me. Max has already done a bit of an introduction, but I do have a long history in Vic Roads. Worked there for 8 years. Worked across extensively in the design team, but across all areas of Vic roads and as well as international projects. My area of expertise is in highway engineering and complex intersection design, but also road safety audit and safety barriers. As for today, we're talking about standards review, design review versus road safety audit. So there are a lot of design standards out there, and it's important to check design standards or have at least some knowledge of them. But that does not necessarily mean that the design is safe. Now, a lot of standards from traffic engineering perspective, road design, as well as signs and line marking with the AS standards. So you don't necessarily need to know all about them, but just have knowledge of them. When we're looking at intersections that we may consider to be unsafe, but meet the design requirements, we may think to signalize cross intersections in high-speed environments. We can design them to meet all the the relevant standards, but when a crash does occur, typically it's of a high-angle, high-impact energy crash, with poor safety outcomes, typically resulting in serious injury and fatalities. So just designing an intersection doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. In addition to that, you may be working on some projects or looking at an audit of a project where the designers have adopted several design minima. Might be for a particular point, or might be along a route length, and in doing so, they might meet the standards, but this can create a number of road safety issues and a reduced level of road safety for your project. In design road safety audits, there's some information we'd like to gather prior to starting the audit. Now, some of this information is freely accessible on the web, which is great. Traffic volume information, some of that is freely available. If we can get counts from our client, that would be great. But if we could obtain this from our client, if they have intimate knowledge of the project, that would be great because it provides us with a background of information to understand the design context. Just looking at the crash history of the site, it's important to, if we have that information, to be looking more towards the trends. So if there's a trend of a particular type of crash that's occurring at a location, does the design address that crash history or that trend? So something to consider when looking at crash history of a particular site, but do note that crashes do have a randomness to them. So it's not the be all end all. So other common road safety issues occur with design vehicle swept paths. So some of those issues that we typically find in our audits that regularly come up to do with swept paths. And some of the issues are highlighted here, and I'll expand upon in this presentation. Here we've got a snip of the Ausroads guide to road design that considers vehicle swept paths. To the right, just here, is a snip of a 19-metre semi performing a turn. It's important to note the red line associated with this diagram, as it refers to the radius of the outer wheel path, which is important for us to know when doing design vehicle checks. So the design radii are spelt out in the Ausroads guide, and they're relevant to, they've got correlating speeds that for each design radii. In addition to this, we've got another snip here of some clearances that are required between vehicle movements at an intersection. And we commonly find that sometimes these clearances are not being achieved. So the vehicles turning right or opposing movements, we need a 2-metre clearance between vehicles to mitigate any head-on type crashes. And when we're looking at dual turns, we need a 1-metre clearance between the vehicles performing that particular manoeuvre. So it's important to note that, ensure that our designs are safe. In addition to this, we do adopt a 0.5-metre clearance to the outer part of the body. because when large vehicles, particularly articulated vehicles like trucks, are performing a maneuver, sometimes parts of the vehicle extend beyond that of the envelope, and with this clearance considering that. So it's important that when you're reviewing the design that you see that line work being displayed in the diagram, and I'll touch on that in the next couple of slides. So here we've got a intersection. It's quite a constrained intersection. As we can see here, we've got our property boundaries, which are quite close to the edges of our intersection. And we've got a couple of vehicle swept paths put down, they're 90-metre semis, and we've got some other signal infrastructure here, pedestals and the like. From the swept path analysis, the aqua line is something that, or the aqua swept path is something that we would typically expect from a large vehicle turning at this type of intersection. The radius is nice and consistent and done in one motion. When we look to the purple diagram, we can see that the swept path has been manipulated, or the several turns within the single right turn maneuver in order to complete the movement. Now, that's not typically standard, nor is it safe. And it doesn't meet the requirements of the guidelines. So for it to meet the requirements of the guideline, it's got to look very similar to this, be very consistent and intuitive to what would actually occur on site. And there are some reasons behind perhaps the designer doing this, and that's to minimize the size of the intersection. As I noted earlier, it's quite constrained. We've got property boundaries either side. So that means that they're trying to limit the amount of land acquisition available, and obviously reduce the cost associated with the size of the intersection. So there are some other issues at this particular intersection that aren't motorist or swept path related. I'll probably open it up to you guys if you can feel free to shout out or type in the chat what those may be. You may have a look at, I suppose, the pedestrian movements is a good one to open up on. Have a bit of it. I'll give you a minute or so, 2 minutes to have a think about what some of the issues are in terms of safety. And there's one there that's actually sort of design related. It's not actually really to do with safety, but something that we might put in our audit to note down.
A few comments that you already raised. So you've got access to the comments?
Yeah, I got access. Yep. So that's right. When we're having a look at the property boundary, normally we'd have footpaths on all four sides, and it might be, once you do your site inspection, you'll be able to see what the environment is like. But we'd assume, being a signalised intersection, that there's peds around, and for a pedestrian walking along here to make the turn to go down the minor leg, you have to step off into the traffic lane and then back on to the footpath in that direction, putting himself at risk being struck by a vehicle. So that's a great pickup from you guys. There's another one that's on ticket. You still got me? Still got me?
Yep, you're still there.
Good. Just getting a warning. So the other one is here. So we've got our signals, and those are your traffic engineers would probably notice this. We've got our conduit that links to our pits for our signals. This section here is a conduit running through a private property. Now, technically we can't do that. That's not our land. So therefore we'd have to acquire the portion of this land to be able to do what's shown there. So it's not necessarily a road safety issue, but it's a design related issue, and we can pick that up as it's a note or low risk item. Yep. Moving on to the next slide. Sometimes when we're doing road safety audits, we're fortunate enough that the client may be able to provide us with digital files, and those that are CAD savvy are able to, I suppose, as an auditor, be able to open up those files and conduct some investigations a little bit more thoroughly. In this particular case, I was given the design files for an signalised intersection. It was the upgrading existing T intersection to signalise it, and as well as improving pedestrian access as well. Now, as a part of my audit, and as I say, sometimes you're not provided the digital files, but being CAD savvy, I was able to run the swept path analysis for this particular intersection. Because the swept path diagrams are not provided, I found that the vehicle turning out, there's some safety implications with the bus, was mounting areas behind curb where pedestrians may be storing. So if you were to be standing here at this particular location when the bus made the turn maneuver, likely to be hit. Additionally to that, the bus itself may strike the traffic pedestal or traffic signal hardware at that particular location, causing injuries to bus driver or the occupants of that vehicle. So that's not great. The pink vehicle turning in meets all the requirements. There's no issue with that. It's also important to check all elements or all intersection movements. So I ran the swept path analysis for the other two movements, which is the left in and the right out at this particular location. And this was based on the phasing diagram that was provided. So I've run it in terms of the movements that would happen typically under the phasing of this intersection, and found that there would be an increased risk of head-on type crashes at this location as the vehicle tracks into the opposing vehicle's traffic lane, which is not great. So this indicates to me that the intersection is too small and doesn't accommodate for the design vehicle at this location. There'll be significant rework required to address these issues. When we're looking at swept path diagrams, it's also important to note that it's a requirement that the vehicle goes from lane to lane. So they don't sort of make a funny maneuver where they go up and use, extra space that may be above the intersection or shoulder areas and then maneuver back in. There is a requirement that that maneuver is performed lane to lane. Some of the issues as a result of, as I say, not running your swept paths correctly or having incorrect swept path analysis or adoption of a design vehicle could be you get encroachment into areas, as we highlighted earlier, behind curb and into pedestrianised areas. Now here we've got an intersection where it's actually been constructed, so someone hasn't picked it up in an audit or a design review, and it's actually been constructed, and we've got this safety issue now present on site, which is not great. Similarly, we've got another location where vehicles are tracking behind curb and they've knocked down the existing signage infrastructure at this particular location, which is not great and may also increase the risk of intersection type crashes because people are not aware of the intersection because the sign is now been damaged. Now, moving on to another common road safety issue that we commonly find is around sight lines. Now, sight lines is, well, they're very important as it allows motorists to clearly identify, react, and avoid hazards that may be in the road environment or on the road surface. So the common safety issues we find are spelt out there, that the sight distance isn't adequate, or it's simply being restricted by elements in the road environment, such as parked vehicles, trees and poles, and etc., which is resulting in low levels of road safety at that particular location. Here we've got SISD, or the check for SISD. I'll run a poll question right now before we jump into it as to, can anyone tell me what SISD stands for? I'll throw it to you, Max.
All right, hopefully that's launched up on your screen. So the question, what does SISD stand for? Is it standard intersection sight distance, straight incline sight distance, safe intersection sight distance, somewhat impractical sight distance? So chuck your answers there. Click on submit and we'll share once everyone's submitted. All right, we'll give it another 10 seconds. SISD. And I'm just going to close the poll now and share the results. So you should be able to see how everyone voted on your screen. And Reece, I'll hand it back to you.
Fantastic. Got a lot of switched on people. 88% safe intersection sight distance. That's correct. So SISD considers a driver on our major leg. I'll just close that down, which is being across the top here. Observing a motorist on the minor leg of this particular intersection, moving into a what it would be considered a collision position, and providing this motorist with enough time to be able to observe that, react, and stop in time to avoid that collision. So the check is done both horizontally and vertically. So SISD, this is the collision point. The value for SISD is in the guide, which is adopted along the major road. And for the vehicle on the side road, it's measured now from 7 meters set back from the point of impact, or 5 meter minimum. And what we do is we create essentially a sight triangle at that location. And anything that's inside that sight triangle, whether it be vegetation, poles, parking alike, that may be reducing the sight line to that location has to be removed for it deemed to be safe or compliant with SISD. Same is done also for the opposite direction. So we get that. So in the horizontal sense, anything inside this triangle would be required to be removed. When we're looking at the vertical sense, which we've got the same intersection, but we've cut a profile along the road, we're at a crest, or the intersection is a crest I'm seeing here. The motorists traveling along, it's measured from the driver's eye height to the top of the vehicle. Now, if the crest was short and sharp, and essentially that line there was being impeded by the crest, we would have to look at a number of things or treatments to adopt. One could be earthworks to ensure that sight lines are being maintained as seen here by having a larger crest curve. The other one would be to reduce the posted speed limit. That's a potential as well. So that's how we sort of address it in both circumstances. We're doing the check for vertically as well as horizontally when doing the audit, if possible, through our long sections and stuff. Move to the next slide.
Reece, just a question from the group. This is just going back to sweat paths. How do we treat lane splitting at intersections regarding large vehicles?
Yeah, good question. So lane splitting is an issue where we've got large vehicles creating large envelopes at our intersections, or we've got large traffic lane widths. For treatments at the intersections, the way we can avoid lane splitting or sharing is adopting what we call mountable areas of curb, or so aprons and alike. Now, that discourages smaller vehicles from using that part of the road, but it also allows larger vehicles to track beyond it. There's requirements, particularly at roundabouts, where this occurs. So yeah, if you're going to adopt aprons, I think they were saying that it needs approval by DOT as to the size and location of those aprons. Yeah, to ensure that we're trying to reduce that lane splitting risk that you've mentioned about.
Thanks, Rhys.
No worries. Moving on to this slide. How acceptable. So I'm just reading the comments here. How acceptable is lane splitting? While lane splitting in terms of, I think, the road rules for motorcyclists is deemed acceptable in certain road environments. For larger vehicles, such as cars, lane splitting is in fact illegal. So performing any maneuver or undertaking another vehicle, just because you've got the road width provided, doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe, nor is it within the road rules. So yeah, lane splitting, you can try and discourage it through enforcement or engineering treatments. Another way you can discourage it if you've got large traffic lane width is to hatch out or reduce the lane width and hatch out the shoulder area to try and discourage people from using that pavement, but also allow larger vehicles to track within that space if they need to. Okay, yep. So in regards to this question, Matt, are you talking about when a larger vehicle is turning left into a minor road and essentially they're straddling the traffic lane? Yeah. So where the space isn't available due to site constraints, a larger vehicle may share the traffic lane or both traffic lanes in order to perform a maneuver into a minor road. Now, when a truck adjusts itself into getting into that maneuver, it's actually illegal to undertake them. So say, for instance, a large vehicle traveling on here maneuvers into the middle of the road and then goes to perform that left turn maneuver. A vehicle that tries to undercut down the left-hand side, that's actually illegal. You actually have to skew behind the larger vehicle as it makes that maneuver into the minor road. If you do not do that, as I say, it's illegal, but you're also putting yourself at risk of being struck by the vehicle as it makes that maneuver. So it's a double whammy. You're going to perhaps injure yourself in doing that unsafe maneuver. Just touching back onto this project here. So this is a project that was given over to us to review. Now, some of you that may live in this area, it's of Essendon, so it's in Melbourne. They're looking at upgrading Hoffman's Road to provide on-street parking in the vicinity of Ida Street. So from plan, they're essentially trying to maximise or increase the amount of parking along Hoffman's Road for local residents. And we went out on site and conducted to see this, get a bit more appreciation of the road environment. And this is what we found. So essentially, the on-street parking was implemented, and as a result, we've now got a sight distance issue at this particular intersection. Now, I'll put it to you guys as engineers. What sort of treatments could we adopt at this particular intersection to improve road safety? Or improve road safety, but also improve sight lines. Yeah, so we could have timed parking as one, or band parking. Yep, great. So that's right. Another one there, we're getting closer to another potential solution. Yep, so what we could also do, and I think everyone's alluding to it, yes, the curb out stand, the curb build out. So what we can do is band parking, timed parking. We put a curb out stand, which provides for sheltering of vehicles for the turn maneuver, which is good, but allows us to move this hold line closer to the traffic lane, which gives us extra distance or extra sight distance to an approaching or an oncoming vehicle. So, and another one would be to remove vegetation. Fantastic, very observant. Yep, there is a tree there. Now, most people would probably say that tree, oh, it's a stick, it's not going to impact sight lines significantly. What people fail to recognize is that that tree over time will grow. Now, and in doing so, the sightline issue will get worse and worse. So it's important to highlight that it's not just at this point in time, you're looking at some point in time in the future where that may be an issue. Great answers, everyone. You've done really well there. There are two recommendations that were adopted. Was the timed zone, the curb out stand. I think there's additional considerations to removing the tree if it was deemed possible. I know that councils are very sensitive about their trees, and if particularly around environmental issues. So trimming or removing that tree if practically possible, or simply banning the cars, maybe the first 2 cars from parking at that location altogether, or removing that parking altogether. Fantastic. To the next slide. Let's move a little lag here. So there are other types of sight distance that we need to consider, and here's a list of them. Now, one that's mandatory out of all of those is stopping sight distance. That has to be achieved as part of every project, as it's the minimum requirement, and that's measured from the driver eye height to like an object on the road surface. So I think it's about 600 mil. So we need that for a vehicle to be able to identify that hazard, react and stop before striking that object on the road. The other sight distances, yes, they should be considered, and they'll be sort of applicable depending on the type of treatment or intersection or project you may be working on. So not all of them may apply to your particular location, depending on your project, but the considerations to what should be being looked at. Okay, moving on to another common issue for rural and remote and unsealed roads. Now, I do a lot of audits, both here in Australia and internationally, and we come across, it generates a number of issues. We've got a lot of rural roads here in Australia, and we need to sort of do some out-the-box thinking or try and consider some of the issues that may be present on these roads and how we can improve safety. I'll throw it to you guys. For this particular image, what do you think some of the things that we could look to adopt, or we'll go with the issues. What do you think some of the issues would be on a remote unsealed road like this? Yep, no correction area, no guide posts, fantastic. So delineation treatments, fantastic. Flooding, yep. So we need to think about drainage elements as well and where they may be located. If possible, providing for them. Yeah, dust is a hard one in these treating dust, bull dust and the like. So yeah, the crossfall can be quite flat, and that might get worse over time as well, depending on routine maintenance. Yeah, lighting and delineation might be difficult to get some lighting out here, given its remoteness and its where it is, but solar panel lighting is coming more and more available. Yes, animals are another one, a little bit unpredictable to be able to try and treat for animals, but we do have treatments that we could look to adopt to at least alert motorists the presence of animals, such as warning signs. Yeah, great answers. They're all coming through. Vegetation barriers is another good one because the vegetation's so close. Yeah, and trimming or removing that vegetation if practically possible. The geometry, that's right. that's a good one. So feeding off the back of that, coordination of the vertical and horizontal important. So that is that sometimes these roads are being just constructed, with a bulldozer and just pushed through the back of the bush. And they just sort of follow the existing terrain. Now we might have crests at certain locations that are in front of or obscuring sight distance to a curve beyond the crest. So people traveling along the road, it looks nice and straight. Little they know, they come over the crest and there's a bang, you're into a right-hand bend. So we may look to perform earthworks to remove those short, sharp crests to get better sight lines to the curve, and just better coordination of the vertical and horizontal alignment in general. Pedestrians, I don't know how many pedestrians will be out there walking around. But yes, if there's a built-up area or intersection, maybe considerations for that, depending on, if we're going through a township or something. Definitely need to consider our vulnerable road users. Someone hinted towards the surface. Yes, routine maintenance. So making sure that the corrugations or ruts, are removed, or we've got regular grading of the road, or perhaps sealing the road if we've got the project funds available to provide a better, more consistent road surface. There's a lot that we could do here. I would say one of the good ones would be around signage and delineation. That's going to be really handy for both at night, but also in poor weather conditions and dusty conditions as well, where knowing where the alignment is critical. So fantastic in identifying them, and we've got some solutions as well, which is really good.
I'll be handing out a few prizes there, Reece. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is, when these unsealed roads intersect with a sealed road, and the amount of crap that gets thrown onto the sealed road is also an issue.
That's correct. Yeah, any dust and debris at intersections by unsealed roads that may adjoin them. Can create slip hazards for motorcyclists, but also other road users, pedestrians or motorists, so which can increase the risk of crashes. So it's not good. I'm just looking at the comments here. Yes, for straight stretches of road designers and engineers do consider trying to eliminate them as much as practically possible. So we try and introduce long sweeping bends and have the road sort of meander through the road environment, as opposed to just providing long straight section of road, because we do get an increase in runoff road crashes. We also do meander our road network when particularly driving east or west. So I'm saying east or west because the sun rises and sets in those locations, which can impact driver visibility of the road. So we sort of meander the road to go in and out of that to provide, give people a break or rest their eyes, as opposed to just driving straight head on into, a sunset or a sunrise. So we do consider those as well in the planning stage. It should be something that is considered for those long distance trips. The verges are high. You're right. They've gone through a bit of a cut here. They should be trying to push that verge away from the road. It would have a flow-on impact with drainage. So providing a flatter area would be nice, because that verge definitely presents as a hazard. With a strike that would create vehicle instability and potentially a crash. So great pickups, everybody. So here are some common issues found with road safety audits at intersections, and we've named a few. Understand that some of you may not have or feel like you have a great level of knowledge in terms of design, and that's why it's important to lean on the guidance, because they provide us with checklists. So those that are less confident in design can refer to these checklists, because they have some really good points that may point you to things that may be an issue for your particular project. So looking here at intersections, there's some there. I know some in Melbourne, urban Melbourne. I'll pick one is island size or splitter island. So particularly at intersections, they can be quite small due to the constrained nature of the environment. Got a lot of buildings and stuff alike. There's not much road space. And what typically results is an island that's so small that it struggles to adequately shelter signal hardware as well as pedestrians. So it increases the risk of pedestrians being struck at that location because they're all standing on this small island with traffic going past them in all directions. So that's something that I find is a common issue in the Melbourne. But there's some good ones there that do come up quite often. Is there any that you guys can think of on your projects that you've worked on or have seen any of these issues? Feel free to share them. All right, well, we can move on to the next one, next slide. So we've got the next slide is common issues found in the mid block, so between our intersections. And yeah, some typical ones that come up recently for me are around barriers. Barriers have been installed right across the network at the moment in treating runoff road crash risk and not being installed with the in accordance with the relevant standards, resulting in a lower safety performance. But we've also got some good ones here. Another one is signage. Now, signage is an interesting one because it's a lot of the time I'm getting out on site and seeing signs being installed that are either incorrect or are not at the right location, which can diminish the effectiveness of other important signs. And result and have safety issues as a result, or increase the risk of unsafe maneuvers. So signage is very important for your projects. It's often overlooked for the bulk earthworks and all the other stuff, the signalization and everything as a part of the project. But if you have good signage, it really is the cherry on top of your projects. And it can really benefit particularly the vulnerable road users, protecting them as well. So I find that's an interesting one. Also find, what have we got? Yeah, access points, it's a common one. You might have vegetation and everything built up at access points, particularly in rural environments, or on the inside of a curve where it's hard to see, or in a mountainous topography where the access point may be hard to identify for motorists traveling along the road. So providing signages to that can be also quite handy, or just improving the access, this level of standard of the access point itself, and removing vegetation and making it a bit more visible. But once again, there's a checklist which is really useful in doing your audits. You should always refer to that because it's very easy to become narrow-minded or focused on one particular aspect, which may be motorists, and we're not focusing on all the other road users that are out there or other hazards that may be present. So yeah, I encourage you to use those checklists in your audits, as well as diversifying your audit team. So don't have an audit team that has skills that are similar. If you're a traffic engineer, try and pair with a road designer, or if you're a traffic engineer, try and pair with someone with construction knowledge, because you're going to pick up more things in your audit. People become, focused on what their expertise is or skill set is. So your audit's going to be, you're going to find a lot more issues and be able to, remove them or provide treatments that lower that risk. So, yeah. That's it for the presentation for me. I'll put it to you guys. If you've got any questions, please feel free to send them through. I hope you've enjoyed our presentation today. Just gives you a bit of a taste of what we do in detailed design audits. It can be quite technical, but as I say, you can definitely, having a good audit team, you can still get great results. For your projects and improving road safety, if you diversify your audit team and use those checklists being provided, they're really handy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reece. Thanks for taking the time and going through that detailed information. So just to reiterate Reece's points, if all of that was a bit too technical for your particular understanding and it's not really within the space that you're involved in, it's just to make sure that you're not expected as a road safety audit to know every single individual design element. But if you were to conduct a road safety audit, to get someone that is, a specialist within that space to be part of it. So just as an example, when we do detailed design audits, I'm regularly calling up Reece and often getting his advice and helping him, getting his help to be part of the audit team. So we like to just reiterate that message that you're not expected to know all the ins and outs of all the different design guidance, but rather selecting a team that have a good wealth of knowledge and can share that. Alrighty, I might hand over to Tony Bull if he is hopefully got his computer all set up now. How you doing, Tony?
Yeah, good, thanks, Max. Yeah, just a slight technical internet issue. Fairway Melbourne here in Warrnambool, so where the line, I'm sure, must get thinner or the booster doesn't get quite here at times. So no, hopefully it's all good.
Oh, you're coming through clearly. We haven't got your video yet though, mate. Are you able to
is that me or you? Must be me.
So I did make you host. So have you tried to flick it on?
Me being pretty not new.
Oh, I don't think it likes the camera, Tony. It seems to be breaking up. Can you still hear us, Tony?
Yeah, I've got you.
Okay, we'll just keep it like that. Don't worry about the camera for today. Tony is our specialist presenter who will be running through the traffic management, traffic guidance scheme and conducting road safety audits within that space. Got a wealth of knowledge. There's your camera. How you doing, Tony?
Hopefully we stay like this, Max.
Yes, fingers crossed. He's working at Department of Transport at the moment, but had many years of experience working within this field. So very lucky to have Tony on board, and once again encourage you to jot down any of your questions in the chat. But I'll hand over to you. Thank you, Tony.
All right, thanks very much. I might just again, I just a little. I want to stop my share for a second and get on to presentation mode. There we go. Share screen. Screen one. No, that's not what I want. I want that one. Do you have a guy with a stop slow or a stop button in his hand, Max?
Looks good to us. Thank you, Tony.
All right. Thank you very much, Max. And Reece only came, I see Reece is gone, but only came at the end of his, but made a very good point about the team, the audit team. And, in the construction world, we have, people who, very good at their wares, being, building bridges, roads, tunnels, whatever it might be. But sometimes we get lost in the construction of our project, and the signing, the traffic management signing becomes a little bit the poor cousin, if you like to say it that way. And so it's really important that, you know, the team that does these construction sites, road safety audits, you have that background, not only in construction, but, you know, in traffic management, and understanding what the requirements are to manage the traffic and pedestrians and alike at a construction site. So it was a really good point that Reece made, that you have the right team that's going to make sure we have a quality audit and quality outcomes. And at the end of the day, we're protecting not only the workers, but the travelling public and the like. So you know, we need that quality team for that quality outcome. So yeah, thanks, Max. And so moving on to my next screen, maybe not. Try that button. There we go. That one will do. All right. So yeah, I've been with the Department of Transport now for over 38 years, and we're going through a bit of a refinement, a downsizing, if you like. No, it's not a downsizing. It is a refinement, and within that, they offered some early retirement packages. So, Max, this is in October. I'll be no longer an employee of the Department of Transport. I've taken one of those early retirement packages, but where this training takes me, we'll just have to have a bit of further discussion on that one. But yeah, we'll. I hope to be able to keep up this training, keep up this level of expertise in this area. But as I said, after October, I'm not too sure what some of my roles will be on some of the committees that I've been on for many years, and those have been the Australian standard for 1742 Part 3, which is the roadwork signing standard. I'm also on the Austroads committee member, which Austroads have now taken over the guidance material. There's 10 parts of those, and I'll have a slide of that in a minute. So yeah, I've been on the Austroads and the Standards Committee for many, many years. Had many different roles within the Department of Transport and Vic Roads, but mainly in the fields of road construction and road maintenance. But I've also been lucky enough to attend some international projects in the worksite safety space. Couple of trips to Dubai, Philippines, Indonesia. So it's you know, been very rewarding. Certainly, those 38 years I've spent in the Department of Transport / Vic Roads, and you know, I've been a trainer in the road safety audits, worksite safety, traffic management, and you know, in the areas that I mainly look after is project management, road construction maintenance, and asset management. And Max, you might just yell out if there are any questions come through, because I'm happy to take any along the way. You know, I think if something's at someone's front of mind, let's deal with it there and then. Certainly happy to do that.
I'll keep you posted, Tony.
Good on you. Thank you. So the little picture-in-picture you've got is actually the parking bay at the Warrnambool Registration, Licensing and Road Construction Office. And they've just got some dots down to depict where the people are meant to park. And you know, I never ever looked at this until one day I noticed, is it going to be 45 parking or 90-degree parking? And I, you know, it was always given that it was 90-degree parking. But, you know, and that's a perception. We often think we understand what the message should be, but when it's really checked in reality, that you know, the one car thought, oh no, these dots are for 45, and another car thought it was for 90, and it was a really, like, it's just a, you know, a very basic example, but a very strong message that sometimes the message we think we're providing to the drivers, in our mind we know what we mean, but are we really portraying the message to the travelling public? Are we letting them know that, you know, where is safe to drive? where can we make sure that it's safe for pedestrians to cross or use? And it really is narrow-minded at times of people who are managing some of these construction sites, that they purely focus on the rubber wheel stuff, the cars and the trucks, and even to a lesser extent motorbikes, that they forget about the people on bicycles. They forget about people in wheelchairs. They forget about people pushing prams, and small children holding hands with their parents and the like. That we've got to accommodate our site for all users of our network. So let's not just be focused on one particular aspect of what we're trying to achieve in the safety of our road safety audit requirements. And again, I'll harp back, because it was a really good point about what Reece made, is having that senior road safety auditor within your team, and having those areas of expertise available to you to make sure that, that we are portraying a safe message to our road users, and having that experience, having that senior type person within your team. And, it's a great skill for people to achieve, and that's why we have the people on board today, that road safety auditing, not all of you might become auditors, but to have that awareness of what safety looks like, just beyond the black stuff and a few white lines and the like, that we're trying to portray and provide that safe environment for all our road users to use. Road safety audit in traffic management. And we need to probably separate what's a compliance audit, and that's what our Australian standards and our Austroads guidance material and the like, and our the Road Management Act, the traffic regulations, they're all about compliance. Have we put up in our buffer zones? Have we, because there's workers, have we got a worker symbolic? Yes, it should be all part of your audit, but it's just not a road safety audit isn't just filling in a sheet with ticks or crosses and the like. This is about what are the safety features that are being compromised at our site. Is there reasons why, because of the road works, have we created a greater unsafe environment, even though we might have reduced the speed, we might have reduced lanes, or what, but there are safety consequences at times through these actions. So it's really important that we look beyond that. It's just not a compliance audit, that is actually we are checking the safety requirements or the safety need of that site, which is so important, that we need to have that understanding of the standard. We need to have the understanding of the codes and and also the guidance material, but we need to make sure that the site is managed in a safe way. And this is the new Austroads guides. They'll be in the pack that you've received from Max and his team, and there's 10 parts to these guides. And just a little bit of history for you. Standards Australia used to have they had everything, and then each state had the code of practice, which Victoria still does, and every other state had their codes of practice, or whatever name they utilise it for. And within that standard, there was a lot of guidance material, and that's what standards. They're not about guidance. They're the hard facts. These are the standards. These are the electrical standards. These are the building standards. These are the pool safety requirements. These are the standards we must meet. Whereas sometimes guidance material, while it gives us the correct way to do things, that it is not written in legislation. And we can go through what acts are the highest area we must comply with. Then you've got your regulations, then you've got your standards, then you've got your codes, then you've got your guidance material. But in a court of law, they will look at all those documentations that are available to us. And if, for whatever reason, hopefully it never happens, but if something goes wrong, that's what the litigators will look at. They'll look at the guidance material that's been provided. They'll look at all those codes and standards and regulations and acts and so forth. So This is important documentation to understand and to be able to undertake that road safety audit at roadworks. So this particular photo I took on the Hamilton Highway just out of Geelong, and as you can see, it was rather disappointing that there was workers. This was a power core site. There was workers that were working very close to the edge of the road. Admittedly, they had 2 lanes of traffic to work with, so it's not as if they were out in the live traffic lanes, but they were close enough to those through traffic that it warranted the reduction in speed, and also warranted that reduced speed because there were traffic controllers just in case they had to stop the traffic for whatever reason that power core needed the traffic stop. But as you can see, that we've got 40 on one side, 100k an hour on another, and the travelling public are more inclined to think, well, this site isn't signed very well, therefore there's probably no real risk to my driving, so therefore I'll just stick to my 100k an hour. But as it turned out, there was workers on site and they needed that speed reduced to 40k an hour. Unfortunately, the traffic management company engaged didn't have enough signs to cover up the existing or to put up 40s on both sides of the road. So therefore, they thought that, well, if we put it near the 100, people might slow down to the 40. Yeah, probably won't happen. And when I spoke to the site supervisor, I said to him, do you realise this signing is not providing a safe environment for your workers? And he goes, don't tell me about it. Go and talk to the traffic management company. And there was a very disappointing answer to get from that guy, because ultimately he is responsible. That supervisor managing that site is responsible for the traffic management company and any other subcontractors that come on that site. So, and the point I'm pushing forward here, that you as road safety auditors, don't be, and I'll use the word bullied, don't be pushed around in a way that you get told, oh, that's such and such responsibility. No, if that is the site supervisor or the site engineer or the project manager, that is their site. That is their responsibility. So you have the right to ask them that question and to provide the reasons why, and then they should be passing that on to their subcontractors and or their employees engaged to undertake these types of tasks. So it's very easy, as I said, for the site supervisor to say, phew, not my responsibility. But at the end of the day, it is. And, if you brought WorkSafe out onto site, well, then they would certainly tell you who is responsible. Why do we undertake these road safety audits at a construction site? And I'll just bring all those up. Roadworks typically involve a change in the speed environment. So, it's important that we are managing that change in speed, that people are able to adjust their speed based upon the information we're providing. Traffic arrangements during roadworks can change several times, and really it can, it doesn't resemble what the travelling public normally come across. So therefore, again, we need to advise that there are changes. We need to advise them that, there are speed management items in place, and there are workers, there are lane changes, there are lane configuration changes and the like. So we need to make sure that we are pushing and providing that information. And of course, the only way we can provide that information is through our signing. Construction contractors may not appreciate the finer points of traffic, and I think that's probably the point I'm pushing there early in my piece, that we were talking about building rather than maintaining that safe environment for the road users. So, and that's why it's so important that as a road safety auditor, that you are independent of the project. If I've got a construction job that I'm building a bridge or whatever it might be, that I couldn't undertake a road safety audit on my construction site as the project manager, because I have too much vested interest in getting the project completed, rather than maybe looking at that big picture of some of the finer detail. I'm worried about is the decking being installed correctly, and all the Rio, is it being tied off, and that would be my focus, rather than maybe am I providing that safe environment for people, the travelling public. So it's so important that it is an independent team. We need to check standards and to make sure that we have a consistent approach. Whether you're coming across a roadworks at Bendigo, Melbourne or Warrnambool, we should be getting that consistent message. If you see a worker symbolic sign, I want to see that, make sure workers are visible. I know at times that's not possible. And the Westgate Bridge here a few years ago was a great example of that. And they produced a sign themselves that said, workers ahead, you may not be able to see us, but we are there. And I'm ad-libbing a bit, but it was something like that, because they were actually working behind the through or the barriers. They were installing the I can't quite recall what they were installing, but you couldn't actually physically see the workers, but they were close enough to the traffic that if there was an errant vehicle, the workers could have been compromised. So that's why they slowed the speed down to 40 km an hour. So at times, yes, you won't see the workers, but they are there. But a worker symbolic sign left up 24/7, it just shouldn't happen. It just puts the wrong message to the travelling public. We've got to make sure that the arrangement meets the conditions we're working to. Got to make sure we avoid conflicting messages. If we whatever it might be, we might be doing a contraflow. Make sure all that signing for the normal lanes in one direction are taken down or covered to allow for that new contraflow setup. So you've just got to make sure that there aren't any conflicting messages or signs or line marking that can cause a conflict point. Make sure that signs are used for their correct purposes. You so often see the prepare to stop sign. It should be used in association with portable traffic signals or a traffic controller with the stop slow bat. That's when that should be used. It shouldn't be used roadwork ahead, prepare to stop. It's got to have that associate, or you can have it with roadwork ahead, but you must make sure you've got that symbolic traffic controller with the symbolic or the traffic signals with prepare to stop. To provide safety for works personnel as well as the travelling public. Now, let's just put it out there. We talked about the works personnel as well as the travelling public. And I did mention it earlier. Who are we looking after in the travelling public? Can we just have people to put in, who are they? We know we've got cars and trucks and alike, but let's have the total area of the total travelling public needs we're looking after. And I'm hoping that I will get one particular group that we have to really make sure that signing sometime doesn't quite cut it.
All right, got some early guesses or answers coming through. Got pedestrians and cyclists, vulnerable road users, wheelchair users, visually impaired, mobility impaired, all users, persons with disabilities, motorcyclists. There we go, getting the whole gamut of the.
I think we've covered it off, Max, and it was really pleasing. And that the visually impaired, and the person who put that up. If we're handing out little well dones, let's provide that person, because we can put up signs and devices and the like, but for the visually impaired, we need to provide something else. So we've just got to make sure that we're providing that. And this next photo, again, was in Geelong, but it was just a side street off High Street. That it was a small construction job where there was a bit of failed footpath. One day they probably excavated it out. The next day they're going to put in the new set of concrete. So, but for people, and this was really pedestrians and everybody else involved with the walking or use of scooters and the like, this environment would have been hell to come across. The crossing point was not adequate. there was probably no real opportunity to cross the road, get back on the other side. And, you know, to provide this type of environment for pedestrians was not just purely not good enough. And, you know, there are things we can do in between staging. Make sure even small jobs like this, you can stage your works. Personally, you could have had a traffic controller there during the day while they are excavating out this to assist people to get across the road, up the other side, then back. And, you know, admittedly, there's a set of traffic signals. So you've got controlled crossing point up at the intersection, but down here at this point, there was no control. So you would have a traffic controller here to help people cross the road. It was a reasonably simple outcome that would have provided a safer environment, but also out of hours, fill it up with crushed rock, a compacted crushed rock. It only take you half an hour or 20 minutes to take that out when the concrete truck arrives, take out the crushed rock and put in your new concrete. And again, quick set, but just provide that traffic controller for the remainder of the day while it's going off. And, you're providing that safe environment. As I said, a pretty simple sort of a job, but the consequences of, you know, people having to try and cross at an inappropriate site could have had consequences that the job certainly didn't deserve. Also, this again is not I shouldn't say not a game changer, because it's the incorrect use of the signing. The stop here and red signal, that's fair enough. It should be 6 metres away from the traffic signals. I don't know whether it's 6 metres or not, could have been. But the lettering on the background is incorrect. You know, I'd say the sign manufacturer thought, well, you know, roadwork signing is black writing on a yellow background. Let's do that. Whereas it should be white. Sorry, incorrect. Red writing on a white background, being a regulatory sign. So, it's just small things like this that can take away the regulatory management of this site. So we just want to make sure we get that regulatory requirements, that we get those right. Another question for the team, Max. We've got 2 stop signs here. I know they're different shaped, but can the group tell me what the difference is between those 2 stop signs apart from shape? And yeah, there's a bit of colouring where I did the getting the pictures may not be quite the right colouring, but what do those 2 stop signs, the difference between those 2 stop signs?
Yes, so I've got a few guesses coming in. So the first, or the one on the left-hand side, is used at intersection, and the second being a traffic controller device.
Yes. Yep.
The second one is
that, but there's a little
only.
Sorry, Max, I missed that last bit.
The second one, or the one on the right, is for handheld only.
Happy with that as well. Just about the decision making. That's probably what I'm looking for. And look, they're not wrong. The answers aren't wrong, but they're not quite to the detail I'm after.
Yeah, so it's the right application, but can anyone think of what it actually means for you as a driver when you see either of these signs? Here we go, Ritu. Don't have to stop as long for the one on the right-hand side.
No, I'm going to say that's not correct.
Don't have to stop as long for the one on the right-hand side. Okay, yep. I can understand that point of view, but I think that might... Rosie's just mentioning stop until safe is the one on the left, and the one on the right is stop until released. And I think that's got to be full prices there, Tony. That sounds good.
That is, yeah. We'll give the AFL goal for that to answer correct. Max, yes, the octagonal one is you must stop. You wait till it's clear. The driver makes the decision. Whereas the one on the right, the round one, and very quickly while I'm just explaining this, who else apart from traffic controllers use that round stop sign in our communities? Yeah, so, and that stop sign, the round one, you must stay stopped until directed. Either it's no longer displayed in your direction or you're directed to proceed otherwise. So, yeah, driver.
Ritu in
on
the school crossing supervisors. Sorry.
Thank you. Good stuff. Yep, I like it. Very knowledgeable group you have here, Max. It's great to see. Yeah, and we have had instances of this where the traffic controller is using the octagonal, and as we mentioned, the traffic controller isn't in full control of managing the traffic. So it's important that we have the use of the stop slow bat as per the photo there. And as you can see, they've got really retro-reflective garments on. They've got the two-way radio. Hopefully they're not too close to the work where they get a bit distracted, and managing the traffic accordingly. So it's really important, and it's always worries me too. A lot of traffic, or I shouldn't say a lot. There's a few traffic controllers who believe that they can manage the traffic from the centre of the road rather than on the edge of the road. I would ask them to talk to a young lady that was controlling traffic. It was on one of our sort of arterial roads, it was a C-class road, and they were on the edge of the road, and they saw a vehicle that appeared to, they had a vehicle stopped, and they couldn't really, it was sort of around a bit of a bend and couldn't see a lot of traffic coming. They had their signing correct, but luckily that person hadn't even stepped out onto the road, because there was a vehicle that decided that they were going to run the gauntlet, and the traffic controller would have been hit if they didn't have their escape path. So it was a really scary moment for that person that that they were meant to be on the side of the road. They stayed on the side of the road. They had an escape path, and unfortunately they had to use that escape path, but they're here to tell the story. It could have been a different if they were standing in the middle of the road. So important that we do our traffic control from the edge of the road, and the only time you should step out is when you actually have vehicles stopped. And I didn't quite tell that story correctly, because they didn't have any vehicles stopped. They were on the slow, and yes, they were able to use their escape path. So it's really important that you do have that escape path. And if you're doing your road safety audit and you've got traffic controllers on site, please ensure that they do have that escape path within your questioning. All right, so we went to audit, and it's right across the construction requirements. We can review plans, we can do desktop plans, inspections, or not inspections, audits. We can make sure that when you're undertaking your on-site audit, and I see from this slide we've got day and night, day and night, day and night. It's so important that when you are undertaking a road safety audit, that you not only do the daytime audit, you do the nighttime. So, we do one audit when it's very early in construction to make sure the site has been set up day and night. And then if there's been major changes within that job site and the signing may have changed, again, an audit is certainly highly recommended, but again, must be day and night, because the aftercare signing, we have to ensure that we've covered off all the requirements to make sure the site is safe while no workers are on site, and that the travelling public are still adhering to the safety requirements that are needed to keep them safe when they're travelling through the site. Common issues that we come across, we adequate advance warning. We've got to tell the travelling public the story of why we're doing something. The proposed speed limits, it's often times that we just chuck up a 40k an hour over a long distance when the workers only need a certain shorter distance. And we shouldn't just, that those crews might shift 2 or 3 times a day, then we should move those 40 kilometre hour signs 2 or 3 times a day. 40-kilometre-an-hour speed limits are for the safety of the workers. That's why it was introduced into the standard, and that's why we still have it. In South Australia, they have it at 25. And that's, to me, they're probably going to maybe another level again. But you talk to the real road safety engineers, and they'll tell you that 25 is a speed that we can be, if unfortunately we're hit, you might survive. At 40, there's a higher chance you won't. So, 40 is certainly at the top end of providing the most safe environment. But that's the current limits that we are introducing. So let's use them to make sure it's for the worker safety. Make sure we've selected the correct layout, or the correct drawings have been used. Actually, now that I talked about drawings, Max, one more question for the group. What's the difference between a traffic management plan and traffic guidance scheme? We hear people talk about TMPs and TGSs. We got any feedback on that? And while I'll continue on with some of these common issues, and I'll finish this slide, then I'll come to you, Max, if that's okay.
No problem.
All aspects of the layout or devices that could be misread by drivers, have we got that understanding? That's what I said earlier. That's why it's great to have that independent person reviewing these sites. Have mud and dust obscured the devices, making them, especially at night time, oh, wow, too much talking, that you can't read them. The appropriateness of our traffic barriers. This one's really important, that you ask the questions. Have these barriers been installed to the manufacturer's specification? And even ask for that, that they can prove that, because too many barriers are just butted up together without the correct connectivity in place. Adequate provision for pedestrians, including the less agile ones, and we spoke about this at quite length about disabled and visually impaired and alike, and especially people pushing prams, and we've got to make sure we're providing that safe environment for our pedestrians and our cyclists, and make sure that there's no conflict points. It's very important that our construction traffic aren't conflicting with the travelling public, because you've got reversing plant and the like. Just make sure that they aren't protruding into that area you've kept for the travelling public to use. How we go, Max?
Yes, we've had a few guesses come through there. So one is being the document that's written versus a plan. So I'm guessing the TMP is suggesting the document there. A few other suggestions saying the TMP is what is being implemented or is site specific versus the guidance is that of a guide. Denise just added in there, TMP is much more detailed. It includes hazard identification, OH&S, etc. Might be best for you just to send
I think
home, Tony. Yeah.
You said that last one from Denise, was it, Max?
Yes.
Yeah, but was very close to the mark, and you probably, yeah, and it is. The plan is, how is the site going to be managed? And yes, we need to do the risk assessment. We need to understand the OHS implications. We need to understand, are we going to interfere with business? Are we going to be able to manage emergency vehicles if an ambulance or the police have to get through our site? Have we got contact numbers for those? I know we've got 000, but are there any other numbers? PTV, Department of Transport and the like. Have we got all those contact numbers, the site contact numbers, the supervisors off-site? All of that information we put together, and then you'll look at traffic volumes, peak times, public transport. All those might be within a taxi area or a taxi rank. Have we got adequate information from that? So in our plan, we have all that information, and out of that, we will then have our traffic guidance schemes. That's the people using the comic strips, if you like, but they're the detailed drawings of where each sign is located. And it could be 2 or 3 of those. It might be 20 of them. Depending on the staging of the works, with the contraflow setups, the out of hours, how that signing is going to be used, stage 2, stage 3, and so forth. So you have those traffic guidance schemes. that for that particular part of your works, but the plan is the overarching document on how we're going to manage the site. So yeah, very good answers. All right, we might start running this to an end, Max, and I know you're going to talk, or someone is, I'm not too sure who's. Is that yourself? You go through the checklists?
Yes, although I should just caution that that's been updated to, it's called a prompt list now. So
it has it?
Yeah, just last month. So it's very fresh off the press. So we'll be going through the prompt lists.
That's excellent, because I know Ken spoke about that. Yeah, that they were going to suggest that in the next update of this document. So that's great that we're taking it as a prompt list, because, and that's all it should be, because like I mentioned at the start, we shouldn't be going through that. We're just ticking a few boxes and the like. So, but these are great prompters, and that is exactly what they are. That we should be looking at the alignment, the radii, the nighttime safety. Is the site, the signs and devices being maintained? The VMS boards, have they got a correct message? You should only have two messages. Sorry, I'll start that again. On a variable message board, you should only have two screens with messages. So, it might be roadworks between these dates, and that's all it should be, those two screens. Once you get more than the two screens, people travelling through will not be able to read any more than two screens. So it's really important that you don't have any more than that. Safety barriers, we talked about that, the traffic control, speed management and the like. And so, yeah, this is a very good list. And look, Max, I'll put you on the spot, unfortunately. Have they updated the list much at all, or just the naming of it?
There's certainly lots of overlap there, Tony, but yeah, there's kind of a different layout as to how it's been set up. Yeah, certainly similar themes are still covered. So
this is part 6.
Part 6A of Australia's Guide. Yep. No, I'll have to make sure I update myself too as well. So that's good information. But Max, that's probably all I've got at this point in time. If there's any other burning questions that have come through at all. I think we managed to cover them all within the conversations that you've had there, Tony. So thank you very much for your time, and would encourage, if anyone does have a particular interest within this field, or you are, yourself working regularly with TMPs or TGSs. We've also uploaded onto Moodle an extended version of this presentation that Tony has kindly provided to us, and that just goes into an extra layer of detail of what specifically to be looking for in these particular audits. So very grateful for having you again, Tony. And look, I'm sure we'll still have you around going forward. So yeah, very, very lucky to have such a experienced fellow and passionate fellow joining our presentation. So thank you for your time, Tony.
Well, I appreciate that, Max, and all the best to everyone, and happy auditing, and because it is a great skill to have and available, this road safety environment that we work in, that we're aiming for a safe travelling experience. So thanks, Max.
You're very welcome. Okay, and on that note, I might grab the screen and I will go through some of those prompts lists that we were just chatting about then. So hopefully you can see my screen now. Does that come up there, Catherine?
Yep, all good, Max.
Fabulous. So, as alluded to, this was updated just last month. I think it was the 19th of January. So it is fresh off the press. And yes, as you would have seen both in Reese's and in Tony's presentation, previously been referred to as checklists. The reason that they wanted to kind of get away from that terminology is because it somewhat has the effect of, okay, I can just print out this checklist, tick, 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 and then that's not applicable, and then that's my road safety audit done. But we obviously don't want that to be happening. So instead they've gone for the terminology prompt list. Very, very similar, as I mentioned. There is certainly overlap, but yeah, we just want to highlight that there is a difference there, and we are going towards a prompt list. The most important thing, I suppose, as new auditors, if you're unfamiliar exactly what you should be looking for, or what kind of design risks could be present within something that you're auditing, that's when you turn to your prompt lists, because it's just a really excellent way of gauging what typical common issues there could be, what things you should be considering, trying to get your mind in the perspective of different road users as well, from pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, thinking about different turning movements. There's a whole raft of different prompts that are, kind of, they're detailed to address exactly all of those different concerns, but you'll never get every single issue from a prompt list. So you still do need to have someone within the team that has experience and they feel comfortable leading road safety audits, but getting stuck into them, getting started is a really awesome resource. So the prompt lists are currently situated in Appendix H of the Guide to Road Safety Part 6, which you should have within your USB, or it's on our Moodle, or you can go to the Austroads website and download that. They've called it this quite technical term, which is described as front loading. And this is something that you're meant to do at the start. In a much more, common vernacular, you would describe this as setting up the project context, or just understanding how the road environment works. Front loading just appears to be the jargon that they've gone for, but you can see the questions are very much about setting up what you expect the road environment to look like, who's there, traffic volumes, etc. So I'll just run through a few of the prompts that we're getting within this first section, which is the front loading. So yeah, what is the reason for the project? Is there a specific risk or crash type most severe likely outcomes? So run-off road is one that you'd probably be looking at. Another one in there is if there's any potential collisions with vulnerable road users. We know that they are certainly at risk for serious outcomes. If so, what are the casual factors of this crash type and how are they going to be addressed? Is there anything in the design that would help mitigate that risk? If not, that's probably a good spot to start for an audit finding. If you acknowledge that there is a high risk area from this prompt list and there's nothing in the design that's being used to treat or mitigate that risk, that should be starting to flag that, okay, I might be able to write an audit finding based on that. Does the project reduce exposure, likelihood, and severity of the crash types identified above? For those that aren't familiar with those terms, they're very much used within the Safe System Assessment Framework. Likelihood and severity are relatively self-explanatory. The exposure is a little bit more challenging, and it's just got to do with the number of road users that you have traveling within a given area. So it's very, very much related to the AADT, or your annual traffic volumes, average annual traffic volumes through that area. Or if you're particularly concerned about collisions with cyclists, how many cyclists are traveling through there? Because the way that you gauge the level of risk may be impacted by that exposure level. So if you know, for instance, it's a local road in a rural area and there's 2 cyclists there a day, versus somewhere in the inner city where cycling is prioritized as a means of transport, where there's hundreds of cyclists per hour, you would probably be risk rating things differently in those different contexts. And this is what this front loading section is all about, defining that context. Does the project address specific issues such as poor speed limit compliance, road access congestion, future traffic growth, freight movement, amenity concerns from the community, maintenance, asset renewal, etc. Once again, these are just probing questions to get your brain thinking about what's the point of this project. Have operating speeds and impact angles been managed to minimize crash energy? I know Ken would have been chatting about those impact angles already in the last couple modules and how they can impact upon the severity. So have a look at the site that you're analyzing and start thinking about, well, what would the operating speed be here? Are they perpendicular angles, or is it more acute? And start jotting those types of ideas down. Have the needs of all vulnerable road user groups been adequately considered? And does the project fit strategically within the overarching objectives or strategy pertinent to the network link? It's quite a long-winded way of just stating that for those that are familiar with things like a movement and place framework or just the strategic land use objectives of a particular corridor you're looking at, you want to make sure that the project fits within that environment. I'll give you an example. If we were looking, I'll just go back to the inner city, and it's a very highly pedestrianized area. It's low traffic speeds, and we want to encourage more pedestrians. We want to encourage more cyclists. If the project was, suggesting something like duplicating the carriageway or creating additional traffic lanes, that one should be flagging to you that, okay, this probably doesn't fit within the actual strategic objectives of the particular road environment. And once again, that could then lead you to develop your own audit findings. So I know I spent a bit of time on that, but I'm just trying to get this idea that before you get stuck into the details of, flicking through designs or going out there on site, it is good to have a think about your existing conditions out there and how the network is behaving. So really awesome resource as you're getting stuck into these. There's also specific prompt lists for general themes. So if your project is, got to do with an intersection, it would be worthwhile flicking through the prompt list that covers intersections, because that will actually cover general questions relating to that specific theme. So local alignment, general aspects, they're pretty standardized across any project that you could be working on. Walking and cyclists, if you do have any vulnerable road users in there, you'd flick through that as a means of checking that you've covered off on those prompts. Traffic signs, line markings and lighting. So it sounds like you may be covering off a lot of this information, but it's meant to be there as a thought provoker. So you're not necessarily going to be writing out, okay, so are all aspects of intersections, spacing type, layout appropriate with respect to the broad concept of the project? You're not expected to then provide a paragraph answer to that and each of those dot points to stipulate exactly why this project does or does not achieve that particular prompt. They're purely there as a resource, just to bounce ideas off and maybe get the brain thinking in a certain way, something you haven't considered. So yeah, don't be too daunted if it's just pages and pages of prompts. They're meant to be taken with a grain of salt. The also useful thing about the way that the prompt list has been set up is splitting it up into the different design stages, as you can see there, starting from feasibility, preliminary, detailed design, pre-opening, as well as existing conditions. So you can clearly articulate which prompts you should be reviewing as part of your particular audit. A few final points that I'll just get stuck into just to confirm the message, but the prompt lists, they are just thought starters only. So it's not the be all and end all. We couldn't possibly cover everything you need to know within a prompt list because every site has its own constraints, its own unique situations. So every site needs to be treated as such. However, they are an awesome resource as you're just getting stuck into the road safety audits, just to start thinking about things that you may not have ever considered. Those swept path diagrams that Reese showed earlier today, you may not have ever seen them before. You may not have known what all those lines meant, but that, may trigger something within your psyche when you go out and do your audits that, oh yeah, have heavy vehicle swept paths being considered as part of this design. And are they able to safely make these movements, or are they forced to cross over onto the other side of the carriageway? So it's just those types of prompts that we're trying to get everyone to be thinking about. Stand back, look broadly at the project. Many items in the prompt list will be not applicable or unknown. You are not required to, write NA or this does not suit this project or whatever. It's just something that you can make a mental note of. And finally, you do not submit your prompt lists within an RSA. An RSA is not, a filled out prompt list. It's not a way to record the risks. It's just a way to get ideas started. So in other words, if you've got the prompt list and you say, oh yeah, that one's applicable, you can't just tick it and then move on. You need to then audit that particular risk and say, okay, I think it's a high risk and I think it's above the safe system tolerance for these types of risks, and you need to provide recommendations depending on which jurisdiction you're in. I know New South Wales don't do recommendations, but generally you provide recommendations how to mitigate that risk as well. I will just show, while I've got it up, where this Austroads, oh, hang on, wrong button. I will show where we keep the prompt list. So this is the Austroads Part 6 Road Safety Audit Guide. I'm sure many of you would have seen before. And if we just hop down into our table of contents for Appendix H. So it is fairly well hidden at the back of the document. So that's why perhaps the previous rendition of the checklist wasn't all that used frequently. And sure enough, the very first thing that is stated at the top is audit prompt list, termed audit checklist in previous versions. So yeah, just confirming what Reese and Tony were saying before. Recognised as a useful practical tool in assisting auditors in the identification of risks and hazards. But yeah, notwithstanding, they are only intended to be an aid and should not be relied upon to be inclusive. So I think that's just a real takeaway from these prompt lists. They have a lot of benefit, but they're not the be all and end all. We just flick through. So those were the front loading ones that we provided before, and then plenty of different questions for all those different themes. I might hop into the pedestrian and cyclist ones just because those are particularly interesting. That's intersections. Okay, so for prompt list covering walking and cycling, just a detailed design. If you're considering the adjacent land, accesses to and from adjacent land, properties safe to use, has adjacent land been suitably fenced? So that's something that you can take away out there prior to doing the site inspection and just use that as information to work with the site inspection. Pedestrians have the needs of pedestrians being considered, especially at intersections and roundabouts. Are any proposed drop curbs flushed with the adjacent highway, etc., etc. So I think that should give you a pretty good indication of what these prompt lists are and exactly how they can be used. But just thought we would share that with you and hope that you do use that as a resource as you get stuck into road safety audits. At the end of today's module, we do have an additional quiz. So thanks to those that have completed the previous quizzes and written up the road safety audit findings. I'm sure you would have received feedback by now. If not, it should be coming. But thanks for those that have already got their foot in the door and getting ahead of the crowd. The additional webinar that I mentioned that Tony actually provided us is this presentation here. So if you are working within temporary traffic management, or you do have an interest in the TMPs, TGS, and auditing those types of arrangements, I'd click on that. It's about 50 minutes long or an hour long. And yeah, Tony just goes into a bit more detail specifically of what some common audit issues are and what to look out for if you're within that space. But we have allowed for some additional time at the end of this session to go through that quiz. So we recommend you just get stuck straight into that while you've got the time now. It looks like some people have already attempted it. So people are very excited to get involved in this particular module. But next module will be on Thursday, I believe, and it will be all on vulnerable road users. So cyclists, motorcyclists, and preparing for a road safety audit site visit. So I'm not going to give you too many spoilers, but it's a good one to the next one. Not that they're all not good, but there is some good information coming up. But thanks everyone for your input for today, and we'll leave you with some time now to get stuck into the quiz. Unless you wanted to add anything there, Catherine?
Oh, good. No, great presentations. It was great to have Reese and Tony on board as well. And everyone had some great questions and answers. So yeah, good luck with the quiz, and yeah, we'll see you at the next one on Thursday.
Fabulous. And thanks for your patience through the technical difficulties, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon and we'll see you on Thursday.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks, Max.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.